In March 2003, with the outbreak of hostilities in Iraq, I was embarked on the aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt in the Eastern Mediterranean, spending a week filming for Mexican TV Azteca and the Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN. From that footage, I've put together a film depicting the action I witnessed, including the way in which God touched the lives of sailors and pilots involved in conflict. I landed aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt on March 24th on a twin-engine aircraft known as a COD, designed to transport passengers and cargo between land bases and aircraft carriers. Once aboard the Roosevelt, despite it being 10 a.m., we were advised to bunk down for the day, as the carrier was working the night shift in Operation Iraqi Freedom from its deployment in the Eastern Mediterranean. A second carrier, the USS Truman, was operating the day shift in the same region, between the two conducting round-the-clock operations. This meant that breakfast on the Roosevelt was after 6 p.m., and schedules continued all night into the following morning when people went to their bunks. Over the next week, I filmed the vessel's launching of nightly raids over Iraq. During the first few days, there was rain and rough seas, and striking aircraft flew a southern route against Baghdad and western Iraq. Later in the week, the skies cleared, and the strikes shifted to the northern front, with aircraft flying the northerly route over Turkey once that country agreed to coalition forces using its airspace.
We started out in the Eastern Med flying a southern route into central Iraq, and since then we've moved in the central Med. Now we're flying a northern route into northern Iraq. So the flexibility of naval aviation has been demonstrated once again.
Theodore Roosevelt is one of 5 carrier battle groups in the region that are providing airstrikes and that forward air power to help the coalition ground forces and take out some predetermined targets. Since we started this campaign, we've gone after initially some very predetermined targets, like one of Saddam Hussein's palaces. We went after a Republican Guard complex, also took out a AM broadcasting facility in western Iraq. Over the last few days, we've changed our focus to a lot of close air support missions and air defense suppression missions, taking out surface-to-surface missile batteries, some surface-to-air missile batteries, and we actually launched some strikes into a terrorist training camp in northern Iraq yesterday. And like I said, we've gone from the predetermined targets, and some of those I believe are still out there in Iraq that they're still hitting, but it's also very important to get the support to the coalition ground forces and ensure that they aren't being overrun, or if they're running up against some heavy defenses or an armor column coming up the road, that we have aircraft in the air ready to come down and take those targets out and protect our forces on the ground to expedite their movements toward Baghdad. We've been extremely successful. We've been using our precision-guided weapons, satellite-guided weapons. They've been very precise, able to minimize collateral damage. At the same time, we can bring weapons to bear very quickly and very precisely on whatever target those ground forces call into us.
A nuclear-powered attack aircraft carrier like the Roosevelt deploys between 70 to 85 aircraft, including, in our case, 3 squadrons of F-18 Hornets, all-weather fighter and attack aircraft. The Hornet is replacing the larger and more powerful F-14 Tomcat, of which there was 1 squadron of 14 planes on the Roosevelt. The Tomcat's role is air superiority, fleet air defense, and also a strike aircraft. On launching, the Tomcat must be powered down, as its full afterburner thrust would simply melt the flight deck surface. These Hornets and Tomcats are launched against targets in Iraq, going out in waves throughout the night, the first departing before sunset, followed by several others at 2 or 3 hour intervals, which meant launching and recovery operations continued all night. As one wave went out, a previous one was being recovered. The attacking Hornets and Tomcats are supported by a variety of squadrons that fly ahead, preparing the way, like the E-2C Hawkeyes AWACS that provide all-weather airborne early warning and command functions for the battle group. These aircraft, with their distinct flat dishes, serve as eyes and ears of the fleet and the air wing. The EA-6B Prowlers jam enemy radar and communications while obtaining tactical electronic intelligence within a combat area. Strike aircraft, particularly the Hornets, would never make it to Iraq and back without these S-3B Vikings, which refuel the F-18s and F-14s both on the way to Iraq and on the return journey to the carrier. A Hornet flying from the Med meets the refueling Vikings 3 or 4 times before returning back to the deck of the carrier. Helicopters aboard include the SH-60 Seahawks, serving in air-to-sea rescue roles, as well as delivering supplies and passengers and in anti-submarine and anti-ship warfare.
Basically, right now we're providing all the search and rescue coverage for our air wing while they're airborne out here at sea.
You had any incidents yet?
No, not during the conflict. We had a few in training, but right now we've had no need for our services, our rescue services, which is a good thing. When we're not busy, life's good.
We launch out from the ship and we tank. The F-18, we find ours is a fairly small aircraft, doesn't carry a lot of gas. We tank fairly often, and we tanked overhead, and then we went in country, tanked again, and then we spent some time in Iraq and accomplish whatever missions we're tasked with, and then again tank during our return, and then a night landing aboard the ship.
I was the package lead for the support of the ground forces that were infiltrating, the paratroopers jumping into northern Iraq tonight. I was the lead for the TR strike package from CAG 8. We went in to protect the troopers on the ground before they jumped, to infiltrate any ground forces that might threaten them, and that's what we did. My team hit multiple targets and aim points, and I'd rather not specifically get into the numbers, but we had multiple aircraft and multiple targets destroyed. We had multiple JDAMs and multiple direct hits, and had feedback from the forward air controllers that they were direct hits, so I feel pretty confident in the JDAM's capabilities. You can see some muzzle flashes, you can see the surface air missiles coming up, but as far as the actual fighting, who's who, it's very difficult to tell.
Well, was it hard to leave them?
It's always hard to leave anybody on the ground there, but when you have done your mission and you're out of ammunition at that point, basically, there's not much more you can really do to help them besides come back, reload, and go back again.
Being a carrier, our primary objective is to provide for those for the air wing, and to make sure that those planes do the job they're here to do, and those pilots are supported. Not only physically through maintenance and loading them and getting them off the deck, but also spiritually. We see as chaplains, it's our responsibility to make sure that those pilots and the air crew know that we are behind them and that we're lifting them up in prayer. We've got a great bunch of pilots, and I think all the carriers would say that. We have a lot of them are very active in our services here, worship services here, whether it's Protestant or whether it's in the Catholic faith or some of the other faiths, actually. We see a lot of their participation in worship. I've got some who actually are very gifted in music. This past Sunday, I just really felt led at the end of the Protestant service Sunday morning, knowing that we're sending them off into battle soon again. I really felt the Holy Spirit leading me to ask the air crews to come forward and stand and literally join hands together around the altar. And then I asked the congregation to come up and just lay a hand on them. And if not them, lay a hand on someone who's touching the pilot or the air crew member. And just we wanted to lift them up in prayer. And you don't, it's very, very rare you see emotions from pilots. but I know at that moment I could catch a tear or two in their eyes as they felt lifted up, and that's what we're here for, and that's what we're all about. And the pilots love it. Another instance, one day this week the weather was horrible. One of the pilots came back and had sent one of his other officers down to the chaplain's office and said, please go ask the chaplains, because he was heading into a debrief. He said, please go ask the chaplains to pray right now for the rest of the pilots who are coming back. We need that. The weather is terrible. We're having a tough time tanking and refueling. And so he came down to ask for that prayer. We were in the middle of a staff meeting right here in my office. And all 5 chaplains were sitting here, and we literally asked him to come and sit down with us. And we stopped what we were doing and just lifted every one of them up in prayer. And we've been blessed that our prayers so far have been answered in bringing each one of them back safely. Prayer is vital to our mission, and so every night we end the day with prayer over the 1MC that mic that is sounded throughout the entire ship. The chaplain will pray for the crew and for the air crew and for our president and the leaders of our country, for peace and for the safety of those who are on the ground. A number of other things that we choose to lift up each night.
Bless these people with your protection. Give them attention to detail. And may they finish each day safely aboard the ship. Many of us on board tonight know people who are on the ground in Iraq.
One of the Hornet squadrons, VFA 201, based in Fort Worth, Texas, has the distinction of being the first tactical reserve squadron to be mobilized for combat duty in over half a century, since the Korean War. Many of the flyers are actually commercial pilots, unexpectedly called up for duty. A fair number of these also turned out to be born-again Christians and active in the spiritual life aboard ship.
It was actually, I don't know how else to put it. I think the Lord put us here. It's such a rare thing to have a reserve squadron go on cruise. Last October, our squadron was called up. There was a Navy F-18 squadron that was taking delivery of the brand new Super Hornets off the assembly line. They couldn't make those deliveries fast enough to make their cruise schedule, so they pulled one of the reserve squadrons, our squadron, to take their place. Kind of a weird thing. If you would have told me, a year ago that I'd be out here on the Theodore Roosevelt flying combat sorties over Iraq, I would have told you, no way, you're crazy. Mm-hmm. But things happen. It's pretty weird.
Yeah. And you feel in some way the Lord has led you here?
If He's sovereign, I can't figure out why not. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you bet. Of course, before I go out on a mission, I pray before the mission. So that's something that I think is important to do, and I don't just pray for my safety and my skill, but I pray to make sure that God gives me the wisdom to make the right decisions in the airplane.
The northern front got rolling pretty well last night with the insertion of the paratroopers from the 173rd Airborne Brigade, and so I suspect that most of our operations will now be focused on supporting the unfolding of that northern front and keeping the pressure on the Iraqi forces coming down towards Baghdad and Mosul from the north. This is part of the global war on terrorism. And this is the world that we live in now, a world where you have an outlaw regime that has used weapons of mass destruction against its own people and others. It has made a home in its state for terrorist organizations and has made this technology for the weapons of mass destruction available to these terrorist organizations.
We're on an interdiction mission today carrying air-to-ground ordnance, and it went well.
The most stressful parts of the mission are not necessarily flying over Iraq. It's the most stressful part is getting off the front end of the boat, launching from the front end of the ship, getting to the tankers, dealing with the weather that's involved with getting to the tanker, making sure you don't hit anybody on your way to the tanker and that they don't hit you. Of course, flying over country, they're shooting at you out there, but that's not nearly as stressful as coming back to the ship and having to land on it after the whole mission is over at night where the deck might be moving around or the weather might be bad. You're aiming for a spot that's about 20 feet wide by about 60 feet long. And if you miss, you get to go around and try it all over again. You're doing roughly 160 miles an hour. And when you hit the flight deck, you're either going to stop if you've hit that spot that you're aiming for, or you're going to go around. And if you stop, it yanks you to a stop from 160 to 0 in about 2.5 seconds and about 250 to 300 feet of roll. A lot of numbers there, but the bottom line is it's a lot of fun. It's very exhilarating, but it's also not easy to do. It's like when you were a kid, if you rode your bike and you found a gate, you ever try to ride through the gate really fast so that your handlebars, maybe they were just barely narrow enough to get through that gate? That's what it's like. Do that at full speed. That's kind of like landing on an aircraft carrier at night.
Each nuclear-powered attack aircraft carrier forms the backbone of a battle group under the command of an admiral, who is usually quartered on the carrier itself. The battle group is made up of at least 8 warships, spread out over many square miles of eastern Mediterranean surface. The other vessels, some of which can be spotted along the distant horizon, include cruisers, destroyers, frigates, and submarines designed to protect the carrier in anti-aircraft, anti-submarine, and anti-surface warfare. These also fire cruise missiles at targets hundreds of miles away during Operation Iraqi Freedom.
When you're at war and there's an enemy out there that's trying to take your life and the lives of those around you, sometimes a good illustration is a sailor who's put in the position of guarding the ship at sea, and sometimes we're asked the question by that sailor, as he was, sir, I'm told I've got to kill, I've got to shoot and kill anyone in a small boat that tries to come near our boat. And the toughest question that sailor had in his heart to be answered was, will I go to hell because I killed somebody who tried to take our lives? What he's doing is literally saving the life of himself and many other of his shipmates. And that I don't think God would see that as something that would cause him to be cast out from entering the gates of heaven. So I would try to help him come to grips with that, I think, in that manner.
The flight deck of an aircraft carrier has been described as the 4 most dangerous acres in the world, with armed and fueled aircraft taking off and landing, munitions and explosives being loaded next to large quantities of jet fuel. The organized choreography is precise. Each crewman knows exactly what to do, and there is no room for mistakes, as just one of these could prove fatal to hundreds. Colored jerseys delineate the task of each individual and team on the flight deck. Purple, handlers of aviation fuel. Blue are plane handlers. Green are catapult and arresting gear crews. Yellow are plane directors. Red are crash and salvage personnel. Brown are air wing plane captains. And white, quality and safety control personnel and landing signal officers. 4 steam-powered catapults launch the aircraft. Arresting cables grab a plane's tail hook on the deck, bringing the jet traveling at 160 miles an hour to a complete stop in 320 feet. 4 deck elevators can lift 2 aircraft each from the cavernous hangar deck to the flight deck in seconds.
We're launching combat missions from the Eastern Mediterranean as we speak, where this is also our training exercise for general quarters, to be able to fight the ship in case of damage.
Captain Jerry Kraft, the executive officer or number 2 man on the USS Roosevelt, is essentially the ship's administrator and in charge of maintaining crew readiness to face any eventuality in war.
We've got over 5,000 people on board, and they've all got specific jobs.
What's interesting is the average age of the crew of an aircraft carrier is about 20 years old. So it takes a lot of people and a lot of young people to make the ship work. And it obviously takes a lot of supervision. You know, we have to provide them direction with things that need to be done and things we need to accomplish.
During general quarters, the ship totally changes character, from that of routine to a struggle for life. Everyone has a battle station, even the galley lettuce washer and cashier from the ship's store. When general quarters is sounded, each man and woman plays a vital role in keeping the vessel alive, from fire or flood control to emergency first aid. A smoke bomb marks a missile hit in the hangar deck. Control personnel with waving pom-poms indicate a spreading fire. Emergency crews must bring fire hoses to bear on the conflagration before it spreads to ordnance and parked aircraft with fuel. If these exploded, the ship would suffer severe damage. The wounded are not attended. The ship's survival takes precedence over the individual. No hands can be spared in subduing the fire. The pom-pom waving will only retreat after 4 or 5 hoses are brought to bear. Finally, the fire is contained. Only then are the wounded gathered by stretcher bearers and taken to emergency medical stations set up in mess halls or offices before being transferred to sickbay, the ship hospital.
Well, the general quarters we did the other night was simulating both a missile and a torpedo attack on the ship, and the actions we'd have to take to combat that and protect the ship. Usually when we're attacked, we simulate things like fires are going to start, flooding is going to start, there might be some buckling of bulkheads, you know, the actual sides of the ship may be getting ready to buckle in, so you have to shore that up. So, and other things we might practice in other general quarters is maybe an aircraft crash on the flight deck, a collision at sea, any number of, anything we can think of to train the crew is what we throw at them. And then we simulate all the other effects of that might come from that. And the other idea is to get our folks up on the bridge, to get them thinking tactically and how to protect the ship. So I've got all kinds of tricks in my bag of tricks to throw at the crew when we do these general quarters drills.
Well, anytime that we're involved in an open conflict, I think people's return to the faith that they were brought into. I've seen a lot more sailors seeking out other people of faith to share their feelings with. I know I've been speaking to the Lord quite a bit more than I usually do. Well, I know that I attend services every Sunday, and there hadn't been an empty seat in the house.
The Roosevelt's 5 chaplains gathered daily for lunch and prayer. Commander Ron Craddock is the senior chaplain, a veteran who ministered to the ground forces in Afghanistan in 2002. Spiritual activity from Bible studies to prayer meetings and main Sunday services fill the schedule. And in the shadow of war, many have opted for Jesus or recommitted their lives to the Lord.
We started off with 10 believers back in December, and we're up to 95 believers. Most of them were new converts. Most of them were people that rededicated their lives to the Lord and wanted to rebuild their faith, and that's where we are right now, and it's continually growing.
There are more Christian activities out here, Bible studies, services, things like that, than I can even possibly attend. Just about every day of the week there's something that you can go and do. Now, of course, with a busy flying schedule and that sort of thing, I can't go to all of them. There's a lot of stuff going on, Bible studies all over the place, and again, the services. And the chaplains here are really good.
I came out here knowing that I'm here to serve God. I'm just here to help my shipmates get to know the Lord better. The fellow believers are becoming strong. We're seeing people saved every time we meet, so it lifts us up to see that we are reaching some people.
My walk with the Lord only started about 2.5 years ago. Before that, I was kind of your Sunday Christian and holidays. It's a little different. I look at things differently. I'm not as gung ho and say, you know, when the aircraft are going over the beach with their bombs on board, I'm not quite as flippant with my comments about what they're doing. I think about it a little bit more. But basically, I have faith in our leadership and our president that we're doing this for the right reason. This is my first deployment. I've been away from the sea duty for a few years, but that I've actually attended worship services and gotten to know Christians on board. So I can't really compare it to the past, but we've got a good group of Christians on board, and we're keeping each other focused.
I feel a lot of uncertainty with what's going on. I believe that this is one of the signs of the time where Jesus is going to return soon, and I thank God that He sustained me through this right now, and my faith is basically what's got me through.
Despite periodic American pressure on Israel to submit to its global and Middle Eastern perspectives, the United States has nevertheless proved over the years to be Israel's best friend among the nations. During Operation Iraqi Freedom, U.S. Army Patriot missile batteries were deployed in Israel to help protect it from Saddam's Scuds. Admiral Harvey is well aware of the implication of a missile strike on the Jewish state.
Well, whether you can sleep quietly or not, I guess, is pretty dependent upon you and what you believe in the capability of the Israeli armed forces to defend your nation. I'm not going to speak to that. I am confident, though, that between what the Israelis' own capabilities, plus what I know that our Army has put Patriot batteries into Israel to work alongside them in the event there should be any type of missile launch towards Israel. We have air dominance over the skies of Iraq, so I feel pretty confident that we have control of the situation. That's not to say that something cannot happen. This is a war, and in a war you've got to be prepared for the unexpected. You've got to be ready at all times.
Of the 5,500 ship's crew and air crew aboard the Theodore Roosevelt, 700 are female and performing their jobs with complete dedication alongside males.
You know, there's a lot of places, you wouldn't trust your 19-year-old with the keys to the car, and here we trust them with an aircraft carrier and being responsible for nuclear reactors and aircraft and all those kind of things. So the big thrill for me as the XO is seeing these kids rise to this incredible level of responsibility at a very young age, and just seeing the amount of pride they take in the job they do, whatever it is on the ship.
We have young men and women on board that have been out of high school just 4 or 5 months, and you see them grow up almost before your eyes, and realize that the part they play on this ship can, people's lives depend on it. So, I've seen a real mantle of responsibility settle down around their shoulders, and they're responding extremely well.
When they first walk up to the ship, a lot of them are intimidated just by the size of the ship and the fact that there are just people running all over. And when young kids come aboard, they can initially feel kind of lost. So it's our job. We have a sponsor program that actually links them up with one person from their new department who takes them around and shows them around and basically gets rid of the fear factor, if you will, of working on a big ship. And then they kind of get established with their circle of friends and the job they're going to do, and they feel much more comfortable. But initially, it can be pretty intimidating for them. Logistics are incredible. We need to do an underway replenishment, which you've observed, I think, while you've been out here, which is where a supply ship actually pulls alongside us about 150 feet of beam, and they pass us stores through conventional replenishment. We'll have 2 or 3 stations passing stores back and forth. By that I mean food, could be ordnance, and then we'll have hoses that come across. We're nuclear powered, so we don't need fuel, but the jets do. So every few days we'll be getting jet fuel on board as well, JP5. And then we'll also be doing, we call it vertical replenishment, where helicopters will be flying from the supply ship to our ship. Just as far as the ship itself goes, when we're doing underway replenishment, we're very close to the other ship. We have to very carefully steer and make a lot of course changes so we don't prang into them. Obviously, we're a big ship. We have to make sure we defend this ship. There are certain times when we might be more vulnerable than others, such as when we're coming in and out of a port. So we have to set a higher state of readiness there. Of course, the most dangerous thing we do on day-to-day is flight operations. And we have to very carefully choreograph and make sure our folks are wearing the proper safety equipment. Our landing signal officers that are stationed at the back of the ship are watching the planes to make sure they don't get too low on an approach, maybe flying to the back of the ship. And you hear the captain talk about it every day when he makes his announcement to the crew that we keep safety in the forefront. And really staying safe on a ship like this is all about proper supervision, once again, for the young kids. Morale is good. Anytime you give a sailor or a ship a combat focus, And that's kind of what we've got going on right now. They will focus like a laser beam because they have a goal. They know we're supporting troops on the ground, so their morale is high. We do try to tell them, how things are progressing. And the media does a good job with that. They can turn on CNN or Fox News or any one of the stations here on the ship and watch how that's going.
God's presence on the USS Theodore Roosevelt is felt, manifest among those who believe in Jesus Christ, trusting in God in the face of war.
That God is completely sovereign. He's in control of our lives, every aspect of our lives. And that idea that we've all been created is very comforting to me, that our Creator is caring for us, He's sovereign in our lives, and He does not allow any surprises to happen on His watch. Now we are sometimes personally surprised, but He's not surprised by anything.